Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on how to invent, launch, and promote new products and services in times of great change. I'm Mike Clem, a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host. Our presenter today is Bryan Mattimore. More on Bryan in just a minute. But first, let me provide you with some brief information about SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide organization including over 11,000 volunteers with more than 300 offices around the country, providing free advice to small business owners. SCORE Fairfield County is comprised of more than 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. SCORE Fairfield County is comprised, offers three primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we provide free one-on-one counseling, which can be accessed via the Request a Mentor link on our website, via the link on the screen. Secondly, we offer educational workshops and webinars, currently all in the webinar format, totaling over 150 programs yearly. And finally, we provide extensive resources on our website, including a network of subject matter experts at your disposal. Our next webinar is Tuesday, September 22nd at noon, on From Idea to Income in Just 12 Weeks with Holly Hurd presenting. Please look for the details and register for this webinar on fairfieldcounty.score.org. Now let me provide you some useful information about today's webinar. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat window at any time during the presentation. It's located in the lower part of your screen. Our webinar will end sharply at 1 p.m. to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available at fairfieldcounty.score.org within the next couple of days. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Our speaker today is Bryan Mattimore. Bryan is the co-founder and chief idea guy of Growth Engine, a 20-year-old innovation agency based in Westport, Connecticut. In his career, Bryan has managed over 200 successful innovation projects, leading to over $3 billion in sales for Fortune 100 companies. Bryan's books on the idea process include Idea Stormers, How to Lead and Inspire Creative Breakthroughs, and 21 Days to a Big Idea. Bryan is also an innovation and marketing instructor for Caltech. I'll now turn it over to Bryan. It's all yours. Bryan, are you on mute?
Okay, I didn't think I was, but okay. Hello, everyone. Are you still not hearing me? Okay.
Hear you loud and clear.
What's that?
We can hear you fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Welcome, guys. So let me just give you an agenda here. We're actually going to cover a fair amount of information here. I hope it doesn't feel too much like overwhelming, but obviously you can go back and pull out the slides later. But I do want to give you an overview of the processes we use to address the title thing, to come up with new ideas, both from the new product standpoint and also successful ways to launch and even to sell those ideas. So I need to start off and just talk a little bit about the difference between brainstorming and ideation, the different kinds of ideation techniques we use. And then a big part of the talk will be on trend triggers, because this is about sort of timely ideas, right? We're in a special time in the history of business in the country, so I thought it was important to talk about that. And then I'll also talk about new products, and specifically I'll share with you 3 techniques. By the way, this talk will be very sort of how-to and practical and useful. It's based on our real-world experience, doing all those things that Mike said we did up front in terms of the credentials. And then I'll talk about different ideation, different arenas for ideation, because frankly, most people think it's just for new products or coming up with maybe advertising ideas or social media ideas. And then if we have time, I'll talk about a way to do an interesting selling strategy. I'll mention some resources, and then we'll hopefully have time for some questions. All right, so that's the overview. So I'll get right into it. You probably have heard of brainstorming. I'm sure you have. It was invented by Alex Osborne, the O of the BBDO ad agency. It was in the late 30s. And of course, the two rules are withhold judgment for brainstorming. And people typically say there are no bad ideas, which is, you know, incorrect. Most of the ideas we do are bad. You know, probably only about 10 or 15% of the ideas that come out of a session are quote, really good. But you know, the idea of withholding judgment is an important one, and that was an important insight in terms of you know, reinforcing your coworkers to not make them feel bad and build on your ideas. And then secondly, quantity will equal quality in brainstorming. So you don't get 1 or 2 ideas, you get 100, and of those maybe 10 or 15 or 20 will be good. So that's basic brainstorming. Interestingly, there was a study done in the late 50s by Yale, and now there have been really dozens of studies that said brainstorming doesn't work particularly well. And if you think about it, I think it makes sense. It's fine if you're just starting out, or maybe it's an issue that you are just starting out with, but now you're working over time, and you're stuck for ideas. The reason brainstorming doesn't work, a good example is when we, you know, did a project for Oreo cookie. How long has the Oreo cookie been around? It's been around 100 years, right? And so if we went in there and said, like in brainstorming, who's got an idea, you know, and who's got another idea, that's not particularly helpful. I mean, they've been thinking about Oreo cookies for 100 years. So we bring in, quote, ideation processes, and ideation is distinguished from brainstorming in that you use stimuli. You're triggering the brain in all different ways, both with different techniques and different triggers, customized triggers around those techniques. And you know, I recently was consulting on a project, a virtual ideation session for Pepsi. Well, we had dozens and dozens of different triggers that we use to trigger the brain, and different techniques in that. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. By the way, I think it's important to note that all the stuff I'm going to share with you today, with the exception possibly of brain walking, all of these techniques can be used virtually. In the last 6 months, really, we've been experimenting, some might even say pioneering, new ways to apply these techniques virtually. And somewhat to my surprise, they've worked incredibly well. I mean, the technology now is so good, especially, of course, on Zoom. My opinion, Microsoft Teams with their channels is not quite as good. But irregardless, the technology's gotten so good now with the breakout rooms, et cetera, that you can do these techniques virtually and do them very successfully. So I thought that was important to say up front because of the current times. So in our work, we've identified really 5 different kinds of ideation techniques. One is just a better way to do brainstorming, and I'll talk about that. There's a whole group of questioning techniques we use. There are about probably a half a dozen of those. Metaphorical principle transfer techniques. We'll talk more about those. Visual techniques are important for insight work. And finally, fantasy techniques. And I'd say that for last mostly, because that in some way is the most not challenging, woo-woo. I mean, that's something, if you have engineers in the room, they might start freaking out with that one. I'm kidding, because we've worked with a lot of engineers. And if you set it up correctly, they're okay with it. All right, so the one I want to hit, this is in the I'm going to start with the metaphorical principle transfer, is, as I mentioned before, is about trend triggers. By the way, this is the preferred method of inventors throughout history. They'll have a problem in their head. You know, Eli Whitney's trying to invent a new cotton gin. And he says, oh my gosh, how do I get those seeds out of the cotton? He sees a cat reaching through a fence trying to grab a chicken. And he actually sort of transferred that principle to the cotton gin. So this is all about principle transfer. And so that's why I want to start with this, particularly with trend triggers, which we use a lot in our work. For instance, in the Pepsi work, there was a tremendous amount of trend triggers we used. So, and just so you know, there are all these free trend services out there. Trend Hunter, if you don't know it, is fantastic. They have literally tens of thousands. They call them trends. I mean, really, they're sort of new ideas, but they're categorized in wonderful ways. So if you're, put in the word furniture or put in beverages or food, you will see literally hundreds of ideas that they've amassed, if you will, and reported on from around the world. So if you're trying to invent a new food product, my gosh, you can use those. This gets back to this ideation stimuli, right? You can use those to trigger all kinds of new ideas. So Trend Hunter is fantastic. Cassandra has a daily trend report that you can subscribe to. And Sparks and Honey is great too. Hopefully when the world opens up, they have a center in New York City, and you're allowed to go at noon during lunch. If you're at work in the city and you're not doing anything at once, you can go over there. You call up and maybe they'll let you in. I think they will. And you can, they'll report on, I think they assess maybe 18 or 20 feeds from around the world from the night before, and then do an hour presentation that day to tell you what's happening in the world. And of course, they brought some of that online. So anyway, these are just all resources for getting into the trend world, and they're great. So if we look at some current social trends, none of these should surprise you if you've been on the planet for the last 6 months. I mean, of course, everything's going virtual. Home activities is big. The bakers, the flour people are having sales go through the roof because there's so much home baking going on. Obviously, racial injustice and equality. Home delivery, yes. Community give back and fundraising. And of course, this all implies new distribution channels. I think the store pickups, I saw a statistic yesterday, they've gone from like 4% of a retailer's business to over 50%. None of this should be surprising. But so what do you do with that? So we got my literary agent had called me and asked me if I could help this author sort of add some news to her books. These are brilliant. This is a brilliant idea, and I picked this in part because it's a brilliant idea. She has taken sort of known fairy tales and extended them, or nursery rhymes, and extended them. So, Itsy Bitsy Spider going down the water spout. Well, then what happened? And so that's what she wrote a story about. Same with Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And by the way, if this seems less than sophisticated, the Itsy Bitsy Spider is sold, I believe, 1 million copies, and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is sold over 1.5 million copies. And the challenge that my literary agent shared with me, though, is that these have gotten kind of old. They're 20 years old. And could I help her and come up with an idea to sort of add some news, all right? So if we go back to our trend triggers, if you can get ideas that hit more than one trend, that's fantastic. And the idea I came up with, which frankly was not particularly creative, involved these 4 things: virtual, home activities, home delivery, community give back. So the idea, of course, the obvious idea was to say, could we record the author reading her stories, record them on video, post them online? And so then the kids who are at home, bugging mom and dad, could listen, right? And see the author in person, reading the stories. And by the way, authors are really good at this because they're used to going to schools and doing programs where they read their stories. So in general, the authors of children's books are really, really good at quote, presenting them to kids. So is this an obvious idea? Yes, it's an incredibly obvious, it's like the first idea you might think of, right? And so I thought of that, and I went online and I saw, yes, indeed, the publisher of these books had anticipated this idea, and so they were doing it. All right, so what's the insight here? Sometimes a really good idea can start from an obvious idea, all right? And so what we've done is there's a technique, it's the reporter technique, right? So the who, what, where, when, how, why thing, right? So what you can do is you can say, who else could the who be? Where else could this be presented? How else could it be presented? And et cetera. what else could be presented? And so those simple questions, right, can lead you to take a sort of obvious top of mind idea and turn it into a really interesting one, at least in my opinion. So I thought of who else could the who be? And so I said, well, why don't we have the kids read the books, right, instead of the author? And you could have parents videotape their kids, and you could cut together different segments where you have, 20 kids reading one story, and how cute would they be, right? And so that idea has then the potential to go viral, because it would be so cute seeing these kids read it. My wife, I mentioned this idea to her. She's very creative and as well. And she said, well, what if you had siblings reading the book? And of course, then the siblings would start fighting as they're reading this thing. And so it gets even more entertaining. So the point there is that you can take your top of mind, first obvious ideas, use this who, what, where, when, how, why formula, and get maybe a more interesting idea. All right. I wanted to also talk about trend triggers vis-a new products. So we just talked about promotion there. And so I wanted to talk about trend triggers vis-a-vis new products. Again, these trends should not in any way surprise you, right? Portability, right? Sustainability, clean label, healthy snacking, new exotic ingredients, and energy management, extra protein. These are all things that we see over and over and over again in terms of new products. And by the way, just a side story, my agency Growth Engine has worked with Entenmann's for 15 or 20 years now. And if you look at the Entenmann shelf, they were frankly having a tough time. Their big cakes were not selling. If you look today at their shelf, it's almost all portable, right? These handheld snacks. It's not all, but a lot of it is handheld snacks. So mini cakes was one thing we worked on with them, where they took their best-selling sheet cakes, et cetera, and turned them into portable snacks. And so their whole business now has grown immensely to the point where they're one of the absolute best divisions of Bimbo, the Mexican baking company that owns them. And so they become a star simply by acknowledging and using, if you will, these trend triggers, right? Okay, so I want to just tell you a story, and I tell this story for another client because this is one of the most, if not the most, successful new products we've ever worked on. So we have a program, we call it Trade Link, where we do joint ideation sessions between retailers and manufacturers. So our client is CPAC. If you don't know them, they're the second largest seafood company in the country behind Gorton's. And so they came to us and said, actually the first time we did this was with Walmart, and we did a program with them, and that was very successful. And then they said, let's do it again with Kroger. And the way it works is we just, we design a session, we fly out to, in this case, Cincinnati, because it's Kroger, have the buyers in the ideation session. So we're getting buyers for 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, which is, is virtually impossible, right? In the world of, talking to the buyers, right? So they're part of the ideation. It's extraordinary because they then, if you will, own it, right? They're part of this process. They own the creation of the new product. So anyway, so we were leveraging some of these trends, right? And the idea that came out of that, which is not, this is not rocket science, it's pretty simple, was this shrimp and cocktail sauce on the go pack, right? So it's frozen and you could bring it in your quote lunchbox if you ever go back to work, and it's ready to go, and it's wonderful. Now we also do focus group qualitative work when we do the sessions, either both before to direct where we're doing the work and after. And I will tell you, the reason I mentioned this particular product is because we had, seafood lovers. We did sessions in Columbus, Ohio, and Atlanta. Anyway, I have never seen these people. I said, well, how many of these would you buy? You like the idea, obviously. How many would you buy? People were saying, and they were like $5 or $6 each, right? And people were saying, yeah, I'd probably buy 10 a month. I'd probably buy 12 a month. And you're going, what? Frankly, you're lucky if they'll say I'll buy one every 3 months, right? So they're going to spend $60 a month, 700 hours a year on this new product. So, but the point here is that it's on trend and it solves a real need, to have sort of great seafood at lunch or to go, the kids when they go to sports in the car, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right, so I want to, if you remember, I talked about these sort of 4 different areas of ideation. Visuals was one of the 4 categories, actually 5, but one of the big categories here is visuals, right? So I wanted to share this one. Hold on, I'm going to take a sip of water. Hold on. I want to share this one just because this is work we did in Stamford. This was a while ago. But I thought because we're in Fairfield County here and it's very close to home, I thought I would share this. We at Clairol had hired us to help them come up with some new product ideas. And they had been, at the time, they had been recently bought by Procter & Gamble. So, so this was, the challenge was, how do we, before I go to that, how do we create a new product in the world of hair coloring for older women who are dealing with grays, right? The hair is getting gray and they don't like that. So one of the projective techniques we did to try to get insights into what was going on in the women's heads and on top of their heads was we had them do before and after collages. So collage 1 was, how do you feel before you get your hair colored? And I mean, as a male, I couldn't believe this. I mean, I'll never forget, I was in a woman's home in Stamford, Connecticut. She's showing me her collage, and and all of them look like this. It looked like, Armageddon, right? I mean, it was as a male, it was hard for me to understand. But now I understood why my wife would spend hundreds of dollars to get her hair colored, because it was just, they felt really, she and others felt really bad about themselves if their hair didn't look right. And so so that was the before collage. And then the after collage, not unexpectedly, was sunshine and brightness and light and relaxation and dancing with the guys. And so, for the male, it became really, really clear how important it was to cover gray longer and better. And so this was the product that came out of it, called Gray Solution. And the key words below in the positioning, it's salon quality. Okay, so this is high quality stuff. Gray coverage, of course, that was the intent. But this was the key. It targets resistant grays. And so their scientists were able to work up formulas that would target these grays and work for a longer period of time. Okay, so the net for the listeners is these collages, these visual techniques can be wonderful for getting deep insights, right? Okay, and you can do them virtually too, right? All right, okay. I wanted to share my favorite new product development technique. This is a word combination technique. It's called Semantic Intuition. It was invented by Battelle in Germany. I wish we invent new techniques. I won't say all the time, but we do invent them and then customize them for sure. But this one was invented by Battelle. I wish I had invented this one, frankly. But it's a word combination technique. We had a project with Chips Ahoy. And as I mentioned, we also had an Oreo project. They're both owned by, they're Mondelez brands now, right? So the way this technique works is it's word combination. So you do lists of words in different categories. So one category we thought would be fun for a new kind of Chips Ahoy cookie would be, let's have category, just things, desserts, right? So you can see some of the desserts listed there. The second category, you might have ingredients. So interesting ingredients that you do lists of. And the third category could be forms. Now you could also do, packages, positionings, customer need states, etc. But these were the 3 that we happened to pick for this particular exercise we did with their innovation team. And then what do? It's Mad Libs, Chinese menu time. You just start combining these, and often you want to combine them randomly, right? So brownie, dark chocolate, and filled led to this line of cookies. Originally, it was launched the Brownie Chips Ahoy cookie, as you can see there, and it's a filled cookie. So we were able to help them fill the inside of a Chips Ahoy cookie with brownies, right? Brownie dough. Or cooked brownie, whatever. And their scientists figured this out. And of course, the key was how do you, a big part of this was how do you mass manufacture this? And their scientists were wonderful. Their food scientists and manufacturing people were able to figure this out. And this became such a hit. By the way, a quick story, I was in the store when this came out and the woman was buying it. And so I had to ask her, this was a local grade A, right? In Stamford, Connecticut. I said, well, why are you buying that? And she looked at me like I was this idiot and said, it's a brownie inside of a chocolate chip cookie. It's kind of like, what more do you want? And so this has done extremely well for them. And I mentioned this one in part because this is the sort of the wish of every new product development team, where a product will lead to a platform, which is what happened here. And so once they figured out how to put a filling inside of the cookie from the prompt of the layers, right? Then they came out with all these line extensions. And so you can see them all. And these aren't even all of them, and they rotate them through. And by the way, the cookies are really good. If you're interested, they're really, really good. But you can see how creative they've been in all the different sort of manifestations of putting a layer inside a chocolate chip cookie. I will tell you one idea, the next idea, which I thought was a little dicey or not great. It was one we didn't think of, and I think with cause. But sometimes the ideas are right there in front of you. So we had an Oreo project in the house at the same time. Oreo inside of the chocolate chip cookie, Oreo filling, which came out for a while. I don't think it's still out there, so I wasn't a big fan of it. But anyway, the point is that this led to a platform, right? And so that's what you're after, that some idea, some new competency could be line extended in all these wonderful ways. All right, so that's the semantic intuition technique. I'll share one other one here. And by the way, if this feels a little too much like a fire hose, all these techniques are in my books. And if you decide to do them with your teams, you can pretty much just read the books and do these things yourselves. This is not that hard. This is not rocket science, right? So I thought I'd share one role play wishing. We had an assignment with Craftsman Tools. This was their ratchets, wrenches, and sockets business. And we were astounded. This is a $300 million or more business a year. Our client was Danaher. At the time, they were making the Craftsman Tools. And these ratchets, wrenches, and sockets, if you see the ads during Christmas, you'll know they sell a lot of these things. That's why they feature them, because they sell a lot of them. The thing that we couldn't understand is they've got a lifetime guarantee on these things, lifetime replacement, but people are still buying them. So we said, gosh, we got to get smart about this particular category. So we did qualitative research focus groups around the country with all kinds of different target markets. And that's important. So, you may say, okay, ratchets, wrenches, and sockets, maybe you get them for dad for his birthday or for the holidays and you're done. No, it turns out that there were huge opportunities for new product development with different target markets. So the guy up on the left is a professional. The guy next, the Hispanic looking fellow there, he's might be called a tuner, right? He's tuning up his car. The guys below, sometimes working on cars in the Hispanic community and other communities as well, becomes a social activity. The guy, as we sort of move from the bottom there, is a sailor. He uses ratchets, wrenches, and sockets. Then we got the motorcycle guy. We got the female on the top right. Turns out because of all the, and this wouldn't surprise you, all the how-to shows, women have become much more handy, or they were always handy, let's say, but they've become much more involved in doing home repairs. And we heard things in focus groups like, don't touch my tools. I have my own set of tools, don't touch them. And then we also talked to just families in new homes. And so this led to literally dozens and dozens of interesting ideas. And they're obvious, right? I mean, okay, you got this guy. So what do? You create a motorcycle set, right? This is not rocket science, yeah? You got the female there who's doing home repair in a family. So maybe one idea could be a gift center, right? Where because we know that these are given of gifts, so people come to the neighborhood, and we realize the price was important, the price point. So we, under 25, under 50, under 100. So this is, right? You get there by sort of role playing and wishing for what these target markets might want. First, you got to identify the different target markets or segments, and then try to figure out how to invent products specifically for them. So here's another version of wishing on this project. So you can see here are a bunch of ratchets, wrenches, and sockets, right? And if you look at, that's a deep socket, right? On the right there. So what might your wish be for that socket? If you're trying to repair a car and you're underneath the car, and what's a wish you might have? Well, a wish could be that you could actually read the size, right? Right? I mean, it's funny because these were stamped, right? And so the idea was, could these sockets be laser etched? And so that's what they were done. So you could actually read the size. And the buyer at Sears initially said, oh my gosh, and there had to be a premium for this. There was a 10% premium. And he said, geez, I really don't think people would pay a premium for this. And of course, we did the qualitative research. He was behind the glass watching these sessions, and people went crazy. And we said, well, would you pay 10%? Oh my gosh, I pay 30% more, And so to his credit, the buyer said, oh yeah, let's launch this thing. And they launched it like within months, and it became a huge hit for them. So, but the point here in terms of a technique is sometimes it's pretty simple. You can just adopt the role of a target market and wish for things. And if we look at Clayton Christensen, jobs to be done, benefits, solving problems, whatever you want to call this, that's the essence of sort of ideation, creativity, and innovation here. All right, so I wanted to challenge us. Maybe, I don't know. No, this is not hard, but it's hopefully it's fun. The fantasy techniques are the ones where you're sort of really a little further out there, and so there's a technique. I believe we developed it, but now other people have used it, or maybe other people developed it simultaneously. But we use it all the time, and it sounds stupid, but it actually is really very, frankly, powerful. We call it the worst idea technique. And the idea is to come up with not good ideas, but bad ideas, terrible ideas. And the power of this is that when you do that, it takes all the pressure off, right? Geez, I can't think of anything. I'm working at Campbell's. I can't think of a damn soup, right? I've been thinking about soup for the last 20 years that I've worked here, and they say, okay, we'll come up with bad ideas. And so, somebody will say, okay, well, how about throw up soup? That's a bad idea. And then, or slime soup or body part soup, right? So you push people to get really bad ideas. And if you look at body part soup, maybe that becomes a Halloween thing, the goulash or something. Or if you look at throw up soup, maybe that becomes a hospital soup that you charge a high price, a premium price for hospital patients, so they can get the soup down without throwing up. So, it's actually a very successful and fun technique, especially if people that are kind of cynical of the process. They love this worst idea technique. Yeah, let's get bad ideas, more ideas, bad ideas. Okay. So we had gotten a call from, not from this guy, but from the ASPCA in New York City, that chapter. And the woman there, we had worked with her when she was at Unilever. She was in charge of marketing, and said, we have a marketing challenge. We're wondering if you could help us with it. I said, sure, okay. And the marketing challenge was, how do we get New Yorkers to adopt ex-drug dealers' pit bulls? I'm like, what? What was happening was that the New York Police Department was you know, busting a lot of drug dealers, and a lot of these guys had abused pit bulls. And so the police department was then giving them, or assigning them, if you will, to the New York ASPCA, who then retrained these pit bulls. And I took a tour of the facility, and you know, I met some of these dogs, souls, people. You know, they were, you know, the pit bulls, and they were just wonderful. You know, I loved them. I thought of even taking one home with me, but we had a little dog at the time, and probably wasn't a good idea. But anyway, they were just wonderful, and I loved them. And it was like, okay, so I went in, we did a day of ideation with their team and some outsiders. By the way, that's not a bad idea. If you can get outsiders to come to your session beyond just, quote, the normal people, you often get ideas you never thought of. I remember we did one for a large famous credit card company. We had all the senior managers there, but we invented all the younger managers, even the interns, the new people. And oh my gosh, this was new ways to do, you know, electronic money, you know, money of the future. The younger folks were so much better at this than the older folks. They were so much more open and had so many more ideas. So the point is try to get cross functionality and diversity when you do ideation work. So I wanted to do some version of worst idea technique, but I didn't want to do the worst idea technique. I thought it would be too weird, right? You know, kill the dog. Well, you know, I thought that's not going to work. That's too aggressive, right? Too bellicose. So I said, is there some way I can adapt this technique? And so what I came up with was just, instead of doing the worst idea, let's do silly ideas, right? And it's similar because I don't know if it's certainly fanciful. I don't know if it's negative, but it's similar because you're not trying to solve it. You're allowing yourself to be fantastical and have fun, right? And so let's just come up with some silly ideas to get New Yorkers to adopt these pit bulls. And sort of one of the more obvious ideas is, you know, dress them up in costumes, right? And bring them in the Halloween parade and make them adorable. And so that was a great idea. Another quote silly idea was, instead of real world adoption, let's do virtual adoptions, right? And that's kind of fun. You set up cameras and say, you know, we know you can't adopt these guys, so we'll just you can do a virtual adoption. And of course, the idea then is people will fall in love with the dog and want to really adopt them. And the third silly idea that I remember, one was, you know, take them out for a walk and walk up to a New Yorker and say, would you mind holding the dog for a second, and then run away. Of course, you know, that's a silly idea, and we didn't do that one. But the point here is that this really opened up our thinking in wonderful ways. And if you do this with your team, you know, just have fun with it. And by the way, come up with like 20 worst ideas or 20 silly ideas before you try to turn them into good ideas. And the way to turn it into a good idea is, in the worst idea, you can just do the opposite, although that's not always obvious. You know, what's the opposite of throw-up soup? Non-throw-up soup, right? You can do the opposite, or the better strategy, frankly, is to say, as stupid or crazy or bad as this idea is there anything I can take out of it and turn into an actual idea? In this case, this one, Dress the Dogs Up, this led to actually their national campaign. We extended it. The idea was that they would just do campaigns to really personalize the dog, or show their personalities, is a better way to say it. And that was very successful because it you know, that's, you know, all dogs are different. They all have different personalities. And so it was the silly idea that led to that national campaign. Okay. I don't think I'm going to share because of time, I want to end in the next 7 minutes. Well, we'll see. I want to give time for questions. Another visual technique I want to share with you is called whiteboarding. And this is, I think it's good for any team. We've done it with very large companies in their divisions, but also, you know, the solo entrepreneur who has family helpers or friends that can help them could certainly use this technique. We had been asked by a printing device company to help them get ideas from their people on the line, their manufacturing folks. And they said, but we don't want to take them off the line because it's going to cost us money. I'm like, well, really? So then the obvious idea is, okay, could you do a suggestion box program? And if any of you out there have ever tried a suggestion box program, and if you're not Frito-Lay or Dart Industries or Toyota, you know that these programs have been dismal failures. It's one of the worst, quote, failures in American business, suggestion boxes. And when we looked at why that would be, there are a couple reasons. One, you know, the ideas are seldom born fully formed. And so people would, you know, they put a half-baked idea in the suggestion box. It doesn't have the chance to be built on, right? That's one thing. And then the biggest problem is there tends to be lack of sufficient follow-up. And that's the most important thing, that if you're going to do this, you really have to follow up on it and make sure every idea is researched and worked with and developed. And that's why Frito-Lay and Dart Industries, who both of whom have been clients, have really succeeded with their programs. But in general, they don't work. So we said, well, what else could we do for this printing device company? And we said, well, let's just get a whiteboard. Now this is obviously done, this was done physically when we pioneered this a number of years ago, but now it certainly can be virtual, because there are whiteboard programs out there, or, you know, you could even use it, you know, very unsophisticated with email. The way it works is you just set up a challenge, and this could be anything. This could be, how do we improve customer service? How do we, you know, react to the pandemic? How do we sell more? I mean, it could be anything. By the way, sometimes the more specific, the better. If it's like, who's got ideas, it doesn't work as, how do we market this particular new product to this customer segment via the internet or something, right? So it's very simple. You put a challenge in the center of the whiteboard. You decide on how many days you want to work on it, usually 7 to 10. And then you get everybody to start putting ideas down. And the wonderful thing about this is that people can then build on each other's ideas. And each day at the bottom, you write the numbers 1 through 7, let's say, at the bottom of the whiteboard. You're crossing it off each day so people know that you're going to be done with this. This doesn't go on forever. You got to have an end date or end time. And so then each day you're crossing it off, and each day more and more people put ideas down. And then let's say it's a 7-day challenge. At day 6, you may be walking by this whiteboard or looking at it on your computer, if it's virtually, and make a connection between two seemingly unrelated things. And we see that all the time. And the reason that happens is because the brain is this incredible pattern-making machine, right? You know, you're constantly reintroducing, you have soak time, and the brain will find patterns between all this stuff, and all of a sudden you'll get a eureka moment. And so you can have your coworkers, they can put ideas down, they could put questions down, they could put trends, they could put facts, and it becomes this chaotic mess, which is wonderful, but the net of it is you're going to get ideas out of it. And then the bottom line is then you have to do something, right? You have to then report back. You have to say, these are the ideas we're going to follow. You could use the output from that as a stimulus for an ideation session. But everybody has to know that this was not frivolous, and that you're going to use this now to move the business forward and address that problem. Very quick story. We were working with the Armor All guys in Danbury on a new product development project. This head of marketing we were working with had read one of my books and did the whiteboard. He put it in the lunchroom. He was trying to get new packaging for a new product. So I'm mentioning this because you can use it for anything, right? So he put the challenge up there. It was like a 10-day challenge. He said, I'll give the winner, you know, a free lunch. It was amazing what he got. He got dozens and dozens of ideas, and, you know, the lunch cost $25, and people were going out and buying prototypes or products that you could transfer the principles from. And he got 2 workable ideas that they then, one of which they actually did and launched. And so the point here is that, and by the way, it's great for the people that you work with, right? They feel great about adding ideas to help grow the company, and it's a lot of fun. So that's the whiteboard technique. I think I'm just going to mention briefly, I'm not going to do the sales thing. This is in my book. Let me just, I'll cover these slides and then I'll mention the sales thing, but I want to give you guys time for questions. So I want to just mention, again, these different arenas for ideation. So new products and services is obvious, right? And then marketing, advertising, and PR, also obvious, right? But, you know, we've done ideation sessions in leadership. and sales and manufacturing and logistics and HR. And of course you design these sessions differently, but if you look at innovating new products and services, these are 7 areas where we've done sessions, for instance, right? Not surprising, the name, or new business models, joint ventures, right? So this shouldn't surprise you, but maybe package product claims and package copy development for an ideation session, positioning work, absolutely. Marketing, advertising, and PR, yes, all the things you see here make sense. I remember we did a session for the P&G folks for Charmin on advertising demonstrations, which was actually inventing new ways to demonstrate the product, which was actually kind of fun. Loyalty programs, we did sessions for Panera Bread on ways to invent and make more attractive their loyalty programs. And co-marketing, you do sessions, the lawyers have to get involved, but we, for instance, did a joint sessions between Unilever and Black & Decker. Unilever had what we would call the gunk in the bottle, right? And Black & Decker had the devices, and it makes for a very dynamic opportunity between the two. Selling, fantastic. The technique I'm just going to mention but not show you. You can see this in my books, and it's on my TEDx talk. So I explain it in full in my TEDx talk. Catholic Knights Insurance Company said, "Can you help us sell more life insurance to Catholics?" And the net of this was it increased sales by 52%. The one technique we used, which was called the problem or opportunity redefinition technique. So maybe that's a tease for you guys, if you haven't seen it, to go watch my TEDx talk, and I'll have that resource link below. So this is what I'm not going to do. You can see it's not unlike semantic intuition. It's a word combination technique, and you can kind of get the idea from this. So I'm basically done here. It's 12:47. I want to just say again that this idea of virtual ideation has now become not only a possibility and a reality, but actually extraordinarily wonderful in our work. Just one quick example, we were going to do a 2-day strategy session for a plastics company in Westchester, New York, and they have a new technology, and it was a 2-day strategy session with their manufacturing and marketing and production people and scientists and all the rest from around the world. And normally they'd fly in from Israel and Europe and here in the US, et cetera. We do this 2-day session and kind of figure out what we were doing. Well, because of COVID, we did it all virtually. And we found out, besides the cost savings and the social distancing, of course, there were 2 major advantages, actually. There's some disadvantages, but there are 2 major advantages we discovered by doing it virtually. So the way I structured it, because you can't do an all-day Zoom session, right, or Microsoft Teams, the way I structured it was I did 4 2.5-hour sessions, and I did this over a month. So 1 a week over a month to replace the 2-day strategy session and ideation session we planned. The 2 big advantages that we discovered is, number one, after each 2.5-hour session, I could redesign the next session based on the learnings from that session we did, which is really hard to do if you have a 2-day session planned. I mean, obviously we'll pivot and be impromptu and change exercises when we're doing it. But this gave me really time to figure out how to structure each session because there was a week between them. So that was one big advantage. Another big advantage was soak time. People could think about these ideas, which is part of that. And then the other big advantage is that we could invite different people to different sessions. So, and again, you can invite anybody. The manufacturing guy who's in charge of the plant in Israel can zoom in with you and be part of this. But he may be only in 2 or 3, not all 4 of the sessions. Maybe you have just 1 session for the marketing people, which would be really hard to do. If a guy flies in from Europe and you say, well, we just want 3 hours of your time, it's not worth it. So you can design and coordinate and structure and figure out who's going to be in each of these sort of mini sessions or subsessions. So I just wanted to share that because, you know, obviously this is so timely, and the learnings about virtual ideation. I put this article in here. This was came out, I think, in April in the Content Marketing Institute. They had interviewed me for just one of these tools, and so I mentioned that. But I put it here as a link because there are a whole bunch of remote or brainstorming tools that could help you do this work. Okay, so these are some resources. The TEDx talk, I did it in Stamford, Connecticut at Ferguson Library a couple years ago. We talk about naming a new ice cream for Ben & Jerry's, and coming up with a way to forecast sales for one of the large big three auto companies, excuse me, Detroit. And then there are a bunch of articles here too, and the links are there. So hopefully you can take a screenshot or put this in the chat or something. Maybe I can do that. Maybe they can do that for you. But it's important that you know that these resources are out there. All right. So it is now 12:50. We're done, and I wanted to, you know, spend at least 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 minutes for questions, and then our guys at SCORE will close this out and make sure we finish by 1 o'clock. So are there any questions out there?
Yes, thank you, Bryan. We do have several questions, and anybody has an additional question, please run the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can between now and 1 p.m. First question I have for you, Bryan, from one of our participants is, with the ideation process, how do you know when you're done?
I love it. You're done when it's 3:30. Now, you know, there's two things. One is the ideation process, and one is the session itself. You know, if we, and by the way, we used to do 2-day ideation sessions. Now it's maybe a day, maybe it's 2/3 of a day, maybe it's a half a day. You know, time has become so important that the sessions have definitely, quote, gotten shorter. In terms of are you done, you know, if it's a new product session, you know, hopefully if it's, you know, till 3:30 or something, if it's an all day, you know, we might generate 150 ideas. And by the way, I have a bias, you should facilitate deeper than broader. So, you know, hair color that uses minerals, that's not really an idea yet, right? But if you push and say hair color with minerals from around the world, and we call this, you know, Tanzanian delight, or erotics, or, you know, exotics, not erotics, exotics, which actually was one of the products that we worked on that came out of that. All of a sudden, now you're getting to an idea. So we have a bias to facilitate deeper than broader. And hopefully at the end of, by the time you're at 3:30, you've got maybe, you know, 100, 200 ideas. You ask the team which ones they like, and they're probably 20 to 25. And then you're kind of done. And then we go to qualitative, and of those, and we'll write up concepts and go test them. And of those, maybe 8 to 10 will be really, really exciting, right? And by the way, we facilitate or moderate our own focus groups, because we, you know, if somebody says something really interesting, we want to pursue that. Anyway, so then you get maybe 8 to 10, and then you have the manufacturing doing the cost benefit analysis stuff and costing and all the rest. And then maybe you get down to 3 or 4, and of those, maybe you launch 1 or 2. So that's a long answer to you're done with the ideation for a particular session when it's, you know, when it's 3:30, but also you should be ideating constantly. A lot of companies say, oh, we did our 1 ideation this year. No. Use Whiteboard, ideate all the time, encourage ideas from your folks, and hopefully you'll get to an idea that's really exciting that consumers are going zoo for. And so I think the answer is it's done at 3:30 and it's never done. Forgive me for that long answer, but there you go.
Okay, good. Another question for you is, you gave a lot of great examples how you apply the ideation process to products, and
yes,
you touched a little bit on services towards the end, but can you give it maybe a little more example, whatever, of how you apply it to services?
Sure. The one example I would share that's top of mind, and it's around the worst idea technique. We were working with Dun & Bradstreet You know, if you think of what's the worst idea you could think of for Dun & Bradstreet, right? They're obviously, I think everyone would know in the audience, they're in the business of information services, right? Your D&B report, et cetera. So we were working with their innovation team, and we did this worst idea technique, which, you know, startled some of them, but we got through it. And of course, what's the worst possible idea you can have for Dun & Bradstreet? It's not to charge for information, it's to give it away, right? That's a really bad idea. And so we began to explore the ramifications of that. And it occurred to us and the team that maybe you do give some of the information away, and maybe you give it away to smaller businesses, and maybe then you create a service specifically targeted at smaller businesses where they can get a free listing on the D&B service. And if they want, they can pay to upgrade that listing. And so that has a double benefit. One, it creates a more robust database for D&B that they can sell, but also it's an additional revenue source from the smaller businesses who may not have a lot of money to do a more sophisticated listing than just a normal listing. So that's a good idea of a quote service. You know, you can do this work in wargaming sessions for services. We worked with a very large insurance company and came up with competitive strategies. Extraordinarily successful to the point where they anticipated an acquisition by one of their competitors, and so they were ready for it when that acquisition occurred. And that came from an ideation session, a process we call disruptive wargaming, where we had people role-playing not only their direct competitors, but also potential disruptors like Amazon, Google, and Walmart. Because if they enter the insurance business, all of a sudden, you know, VSP could be out of business. So that's another service. And I got dozens more, but I'll move on. You know.
Okay. All right, great. I'm going to ask this question, but it may require a whole webinar to answer it. So maybe in a minute or two. Question is, how do you get from the ideation process to essentially the monetization of the ideas?
Oh, that's a great question. I really should have addressed it. So thank the viewer, listener for that. What we'll often do in a session is we'll do, we call it the billboard technique. If you go on fastcompany.com, I wrote an article about, quote, billboarding, which is a simple way to create a concept for an idea. So a headline, a visual, and a reason to believe. So it's really good. It's like an elevator speech for a concept. Then then what we do is once you have those, we then do the qualitative testing. And you know, a day of focus groups might cost you $20,000, $25,000. So for the smaller business guy, just go out and start talking to people. Show them your idea. See what they think. And by the way, try to ask these questions really from a learning standpoint, not from a validation standpoint. You're not trying to validate your idea, you're trying to learn it. I remember we did a project for Dr. Scholl's. We told them we wanted ugly prototypes because we wanted people to give us input and not say change the color, but say, oh, you know, that really is not very good. You should do this, this, and that. So to monetize, then you've got to figure out the prototypes, you go test it, you know, then we're into the process of manufacturing and launching, and hopefully you can launch in creative ways in social media.
Okay, great. I think I have time for one more question, and
okay.
It's who owns the ideas that you don't use?
They do. Yeah, the client owns them. It's a good question, though. We did I can mention this, we did an innovation audit for Schick one time. And we were going around being creative, talking to all their research scientists, you know, what do you got in your bottom drawer that never happened or that wasn't a success? Or even for Thomas's, I remember we had helped them launch a corn English muffin. It didn't succeed in the marketplace. And when we looked at that, we discovered it was because the samples we were testing, lab samples, were not the same as the production samples. And so to their credit, they went back and reformulated and relaunched it, and then it became a success. The answer is, though, the client owns these ideas. And I will tell you, to tell these stories, particularly in Idea Stormers, that book, oh my gosh, especially with Procter & Gamble, it took us 3 months to get permission to tell these stories. But the answer is the client owns everything.
Okay, that's great. That is all the time we have today for questions. Bryan, thank you very much for presenting today.
You're welcome. It was fun, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Okay, our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, as I said before, at noon. Thank you all for joining us. Bryan, thank you very much, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.